In today's video, we will be giving every single AFC team a grade on their offseason, grading them on how good their trades were, their free agency was, all those different things that happen in the offseason. But before we get started, let me remind you to check out W.GG and use code SHREDDER for 10% off your order. They have some of the best energy drinks you'll ever taste, and they're far cheaper than most compared to the price point of other businesses that are similar. So check out W.GG or click the link in the description, and let's get right into this video. We're going to start out in the AFC North and talk about the Baltimore Ravens here. So first off, to break this down, how this works, yes, you see some color coding. What this basically is the darker on, there's two different sides to this. The subtraction sides, the red, it means like a guy they shouldn't have really lost or a guy they really should have kept. But if it was red in the addition side or the orange in the addition side, it's kind of the opposite. It's more like these guys aren't really that big of an impact. For example, Derrick Henry's more green, but Tyler Huntley's more green. You know, if they lost, the fact they lost Tyler Huntley, it's fine. But Derrick Henry, good addition. Either way, if that makes sense, we'll continue on. Starting off with the offense, you know, you lose Kevin Zeitler. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. He's been a really good guard for a long time. You lose both of your running backs, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Not that you've really had J.K. Dobbins before anyways. Tyler Huntley leaving, it could be worse. I mean, it's a really good backup for Lamar specifically, but it is what it is. Odell being gone, he was impactful, but not incredibly amazing. He was fine. John Simpson was a guy who played over, I believe it was over 90% of their snaps. That's a big deal they lost him. Devin Duvernay, you know, not the best loss because the fact that he did a lot of special team stuff as well. Mike McDonald, biggest loss here, though. Biggest loss here. I think this defense is significantly worse this year, simply based off the fact that they lost a really key part of this defense, which is their defensive coordinator. Patrick Queen is a good loss, but or a bad loss, excuse me, but it's not the most impactful. We're yet to see if Patrick Queen's truly that big of a deal himself or if he really was a product of Roquan Smith being number one. And then Geno Stone, really the other guy I want to highlight here. You know, a really good player who played for them a lot, played over 80% of their snaps if I'm not mistaken. And, I mean, he's really good as a role player, so you hate to lose that kind of guy. The additions they brought in, though, Zach Orr, I don't really see this as much of an upgrade at all, primarily because of how good McDonald is. It's not really that big about how bad Orr is. It's more about how good McDonald was, if that makes sense. Offensively, obviously, Derrick Henry is going to be impactful. However, I'm not really sold that he's going to be as impactful as many people think. He's going to be 31 this year, 32, whatever it is, or I believe it's 31. I don't really see him continuing to be that great. It's whatever. Josh Jones will be decent as a offensive tackle, a potential swing tackle, or maybe even a rotational starter if needed, but not special. Defensively, Eddie Jackson's one of those guys who, he's going to have that veteran savvy, but is he really as good as he once was? No, probably not. Either way, the last thing we'll cover here is the draft class. I really like the pickup of Nate Wiggins in the first round, and then, Devontae Walker in, I believe it was the third round, is a good pickup as well. But honestly, it's nothing special in this draft class. It's a good draft class. The draft class alone probably gives you about a B. But this whole grade for this team, I'm going to give them a C+. Overall, I think they lost more than they gained. Patrick Queen, Kevin Zeitler, Mike McDonald's huge loss. I don't really feel like Derrick Henry really fills that void, but it is what it is. Going to the Bengals. The Bengals, they lose Jonah Williams, who, is he the best player? No, not necessarily, but he played almost every single snap for them last year. That is a big deal. I don't think Joe Mixon's all that big of a loss. Joe Mixon has been subbed out for Samaje Perine in crunch time every bit of the last 2 years, so I see that as a borderline irrelevancy. Not really concerned about it. The biggest loss here on offense, to my opinion, I know I said Jonah Williams is red, so that's darker, it's worse. However, it's just because he played so many snaps, and that's hard to lose, a guy who played that many snaps for you. Brian Callahan and Bill Callahan, the offensive coordinator and O-line coach, yes, father and son, go to Tennessee. And Brian Callahan was a big part of this offensive creation, getting Joe Burrow to the point he's been. I think that could be very dangerous for them. Bringing in Dan Pitcher could be very fine, but I don't know he's going to be as good as Brian Callahan in terms of play calling. We're yet to see that. It's a completely new front for that. DJ Reader is going to be a massive loss defensively, but it's okay. I think they'll be able to suffice. I do really like the draft pick of Chris Jenkins, and McKinley Jackson, not so bad as either. Mainly Chris Jenkins, though. That'll be a good fit for the hole that's left there by DJ Reader. Otherwise, they bring in Zach Moss. I mean, he's a fine player. I'm really excited to see what Chase Brown can do for this offense, though. And Geno Stone, jumping from Baltimore to Cincinnati, I like what he can do. I think he can be a very good safety for this team that really honestly needs it after losing Jesse Bates a couple seasons back. Overall, a solid offseason. Jamarius Mims is another good pickup. Making Jonah Williams far less important to this offense. It's just the fact of you lose a guy who played like almost 100% of your snaps. That's just hard to do. Either way, I'm going to give them, it'll be a B-. It's fine. It's a good offseason. It's not great, but it's very fine. I don't think the losses here are as bad as Baltimore. I think, mainly because they filled one-for-one holes a lot better. Chris Jenkins to DJ Reader, if he works out, is solid. Tyler Boyd, I mean, he's a loss, but at the same time, in the age, it's probably fine. Anyways, going to Cleveland. Cleveland's a team that did decent. The best thing they did, though, was picking up Mike Vrabel as a coordinator or an extra coach, whatever he is. He's a consultant of some kind, I think is the title, but whatever. They lose, some valuable depth pieces, Sione Takitaki, Joe Flacco, Jerron Christian, Anthony Walker, but none of this is incredibly terrible. None of this is detrimental to the team. I think they get a really good backup in Jameis Winston. That's going to be very helpful for them, assuming Deshaun Watson doesn't play the whole season, which he never does. Nyheim Hines is a guy who he can do some things. He can, do some special team stuff. He can do some, scat back, gadget player type of stuff, and he'll be helpful. Tyler Huntley will be a good backup as well. It's kind of shocking they now have 3 decent-ish quarterbacks here, but it is what it is. Jerry Jeudy, also, a solid addition. I don't think he is amazing, and I think the camp hype for him has been quite overblown, but he's a fine player. There's nothing wrong with Jerry Jeudy. He's just not a number 2 in my opinion. He's probably a number 2B or a 3A, if that makes any sense. At this point in his career, he just hasn't shown enough after his high drafting back in the day. I say that like it wasn't just 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, whatever. The draft class they got, Zach Zenner, I'm really excited about, assuming he can be healthy. Jamari Thrash could be really solid given time. Mike Hall, if he can stay on the field and not get arrested again, can be really good. But other than that, it's a solid offseason. Nothing too crazy, and the Mike Vrabel thing really carries them to a B here. That's a very good pickup. A guy like Brian Flores got hired to the Steelers a few years ago, not even as their defensive coordinator, but incredibly increased the ability of that defense just because of being who he was on the coaching roster. Going into Pittsburgh now, the final team in this division, they lose Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, the entire quarterback room. Very rare you see that happen. They pick up Kyle Allen, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. I think this room is overall upgraded. I do think that Kenny Pickett to Justin Fields is borderline lateral of a move. Just because Justin Fields, yeah, he's a 4-4 quarterback. That's crazy. He can't throw the ball consistently. Kenny Pickett at least has some accuracy to him. I've never been the biggest Kenny Pickett guy. Check my channel out whenever the Steelers drafted him. I'm not really the biggest fan of him. I don't think he's all that great at all. But you can also say that Matt Canada was a big problem. And that's why he is as green as you can be on this. That is a good loss in terms of that. Mitch Trubisky, also a good loss because he was pretty terrible for Pittsburgh. Chuks Okorafor being a starter, a potential starter back and forth, through the years. Not the greatest loss, but it's serviceable, especially now they've drafted Troy Fautanu and Broderick Jones. And then Deontay Johnson, one of the starting receivers, was traded, but they pick up Dante Jackson. They pick up Patrick Queen and Deshaun Elliott, some really solid players. Cordero Patterson, Russell Wilson, as I've already said, and Bill Burr, the punter. All a great amount of increase, I think. This roster improves a lot. They lost some very, very much deep depth, but they didn't lose a lot of even their key depth. Like guys like Armon Watts. He's basically their 3rd or 4th D tackle. He played a lot because of injury, but as long as the 3rd or 4th D tackle isn't playing, you don't really need Armon Watts. So for Pittsburgh, including their draft and everything they've done, I think they've get an A-. They get a massive increase at the OC position. They get a massive increase across the depth chart, the quarterback room. I think the biggest loss they had is receiver room, but Pittsburgh is a manufacturer of wide receivers, so I'm not really that concerned about it. Going into the AFC East. Now, this, Stephon Diggs is the big key one here. They lose Ken Dorsey. They get Joe Brady. I think that's a positive move, honestly, both ways. Ken Dorsey is a good fire. Joe Brady is a good hire. But Stephon Diggs, unpopular opinion here, I think that is a big addition that they lost him. That's what you call an addition by subtraction. He's a head case. He is. Simple as that. And, you know, the things you see with him, he's a great player, but he also did show signs of regression this past year. I think it's a good thing they got out of him when they did. And I also think this whole Bills team, the roster, the receiver room, all these different things, people are very much doubting this year, and understandably so. But I think there's reason to believe that they could be relatively solid. A guy like Curtis Samuel, he's no nobody. He's a very solid receiver. Is he Stephon Diggs? Absolutely not. But sometimes a group is better than a single guy. Gabe Davis is a borderline non-factor. I'm not even concerned with him. But the rest of these additions, I mean, they got Will Clapp for one. But Nick Morrow, a very solid linebacker. Daquan Jones, a very solid defensive lineman. There's a lot of good things here they added in depth. I also really do like their draft class. Keon Coleman, I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I think he's fine. Van Pran Granger's the interior lineman, the guard, the center, whatever you want to call him. Very solid pickup there. Ray Davis probably has some good tread on him. And then the two defensive top guys, Cole Bishop and Dwayne Carter. I'm very excited to see them play. I think a guy like Cole Bishop could be a starter on this team within the year. Buffalo had a good offseason, in my opinion, with all things considered. They're getting a B- from me. I think it's the Poyer, the Hyde stuff, the Leonard Floyd, not so much Leonard Floyd, but Poyer, Hyde, and Trey White. Yeah, they're good players, but they're never on the field. You probably got better by getting them out of your books, off of your contracts, off of your financials, and getting guys who can actually stay on the field more often than not. Going over to Miami, big scary loss here in Christian Wilkins that they have not replaced. Daquan Jones, he is still here. I don't know what the deal with that is. I don't know which team he's supposed to be on. That is just a mistype. Am I crazy here? No, he's definitely just a mistype on both. Yeah, he definitely is. Either way, apologies for that. They get Jordan Poyer, great. Calais Campbell, great. Calais Campbell is not Christian Wilkins, let me tell you what. Neville Gallimore, he's not Christian Wilkins, let me tell you what. Odell, I think that's a very good addition. He's a better addition than he was a subtraction for Baltimore, simply because of what his role is going to be for Miami versus what it was in Baltimore. In Baltimore, you could argue he was the second receiver there, considering Mark Andrews was injured for a lot of last year. Odell, he's going to be the third or fourth option here at best. You're going to have a running back over him more than likely. Two receivers for sure. All these different things. I do think, the Robert Hunt and Connor Williams, the losses are pretty bad. Andrew Van Ginkel, Christian Wilkins, Ron Baker. It's a tough situation. Vic Fangio, not a great loss. Anthony Weaver is a solid pickup just because he's not Vic Fangio, if that makes any sense. Dolphin fans, I'm sure you'll know what I mean by that. But overall, not the best offseason. I don't really care for their draft either. C- for me from this one. It's mainly because they've had so many losses and not enough pickups from those losses. Going to the Jets now. A very big one here. Bryce Huff was their biggest loss. And honestly, if that's your biggest loss, you're in a good spot, to be quite honest. Mike Williams is a solid pickup. Tyron Smith is a solid pickup. But the thing is, they have to stay healthy. And that's a big question mark for them. I mean, always is going to be. I do really like their draft, though. Olu Fashanu, great pickup. Going to be their starting tackle for a long time, assuming he gets it this year. I really do think he will. Malachi Corley, a receiver I do like. Braylon Allen, a running back I would like a pretty good amount, especially in, addition to Breece Hall. Then Jordan Travis as a guy you can develop under Rodgers. I like that. It's just a good situation. They pick up Isaiah Oliver. They pick up, Javon Kinlaw. Hassan Reddick is up in the air whether he's actually a pickup or not. They might just be sending him out somewhere else, and that's fine. But overall, it's a C+ because, yeah, you lost some things. Laken Tomlinson, you lost Bryce Huff. That's not great. I mean, but you didn't replace it with anything special unless Hassan Reddick does play. If Hassan Reddick does play, if he does come back to this team, this probably bumps up to about a B- or a B. But right now, with the fact that Hassan Reddick is in the situation he is, this is pretty scary for the Jets. I mean, they might lose a guy for nothing when they, already owe a third-round pick, and they might send him away for far less than that. And then going to the New England Patriots. This is a team that is very interesting, I guess you could say. I don't really know what to say by that. They lose. I think their biggest loss is probably Mac Jones because he was their starter. They lost Bill O'Brien, but they did that on purpose. They bring in Alex Van Pelt, formerly of the Browns. Congratulations. I wouldn't really call that an upgrade. They bring in Chukwuma Okorafor. That's a solid starter in spots. They bring in Armon Watts. He's a backup probably, but a good backup. Austin Hooper's fine. Jacoby Brissett, a good bridge quarterback. However, the stud here is definitely going to be Drake May, their first-round quarterback they took. And then Jalen Polk. I'm interested to see how those two plus Javon Baker how all of them work in terms of this. We've seen a couple preseason games, and I like what I've seen from Drake May, especially in this Week 2 preseason game that just happened. I think Drake May is going to be the starter sooner rather than later. That's my hot take here. Personally, I think Drake May was the QB2 in this class. Jaden Daniels, QB3. Caleb Williams, obviously, number 1. But overall, it's a good offseason for them. C+, I mean, they just didn't do anything special. That's the only problem with them. Do I blame them? Do I blame them for not being able to do anything special? Not really. You don't have anything for people to want to come to New England for, but nothing was special, so I can't give you a great grade. Now moving to the AFC South. The Colts re-signed everyone on the face of the earth. That's all they ever do. They bring in that aren't re-signed. The only guys they actually did anything with are Joe Flacco, Laquan Treadwell, and Raekwon Davis. Raekwon Davis, solid pickup, but you're putting him behind both DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart, so I don't really get the whole pickup there. Joe Flacco, he's a good backup, I guess, if Anthony Richardson gets hurt again. Cool. Laquan Treadwell is a fine 5th receiver. Congratulations. I don't really know what the goal is there. They lost Gardner Minshew. I mean, it's a tough loss because he was so good last year with Shane Steichen, but at the same time, he wasn't really going to play this year anyway, so does it really matter? I don't think so. But my problem with them is the fact that they were in on all these different guys and not one of them came to Indianapolis. That's always their biggest issue, so I can't give them a best grade. However, they are saved by their draft class. I'm a huge fan of Adonai Mitchell. I think he's going to be their wide receiver 2 in no time behind Pittman, obviously. Downs is great, but watch out, Josh Downs. Adonai Mitchell's special. Laitu Latu's also a really solid pickup. Would I have taken him over Dallas Turner personally? Probably not, but don't hate the pick either way. Matt Goncalves will be a solid backup tackle. Tanner Bordellini's a solid interior guy. A lot of really good here in this draft. That is going to be good enough to save them from the free agency grade and not be terrible. It's going to give them a C, but that's just because they did nothing in free agency on the trade block or anything to make anything happen. It's kind of embarrassing. Going down to Jacksonville now, a lot more happened here. But this is just a normal team. They lose Calvin Ridley, which, I mean, that sucks because he was your wide receiver 2. But I don't really think he was all that good anyway, so it's not that big a deal. The biggest loss to me is probably Darius Williams. Really good last year. Definitely really good. Foley Fatukasi also really solid player they lost. But, they bring in Darnell Savage. I'm a fan of that move. They bring in, Terrell Edmonds, a very solid player. Is he special? No, but he's fine. Eric Armstead's a very good pickup. They bring in just about every safety known to man. Savage, Edmonds, Gibson, Amos, Armstead. And it's Travis Gibson is a defensive end. I just forgot to change that. My apologies there. But either way, they brought in a ton of safeties, so I guess they're trying to figure all that out. Right now, though, I mean, Darby's a solid pickup. They needed another corner. Trey Flowers is solid. But also, once again, nothing special. Mike Caldwell is probably a good fire. They bring in Ryan Nielsen, which is probably better for them anyways. I'm not a fan of Gabe Davis. I'm not a fan of Devin Duvernay. I'm not a fan of Adrian Amos at this point in his career. It's nothing special here once again. The draft class, I am excited about Brian Thomas for what he can do with Trevor Lawrence. But is it going to be special? I don't know. Mason Smith, I feel like he was a little overdrafted. That's kind of my thing for a lot of these players on this team, but it's the Jaguars. Are you shocked? They're going to get a B from me just because they did get Armstead. They got Morse is a big one. Savage. They got, Eric Armstead's a big one there for sure. Savage helps. Mitch Morse, that's going to help the O-line a ton. I wish they would have done better on the O-line in the draft as well, but the few things they did do, and also another reason why they do get a B, it seems kind of high, I know, is because it looks like they're trying to help Trevor Lawrence. They got 4 wide receivers in this offseason. They got rid of one that was going to be high overpaid, Calvin Ridley. One that's a good depth piece in Zay Jones. But they at least are trying to do something for him. That gives them a B for intention, I guess. Then going to the Houston Texans. Not the best offseason here outside of getting Danielle Hunter. That is really the big kicker here. Stephon Diggs is a fine addition. Not wrong about it. He's going to be a better addition for Houston than he is a subtraction for the Bills. Because he was a problem with Buffalo. Could he be a problem here? Probably. He probably will be. He was a problem in the last 2 spots. However, he won't be a problem right now. And he's also getting older, so maybe he'll mellow out. Probably not, but maybe. But Azeez Al-Shaair is solid. Foley Fatukasi is very solid. And you get a bunch of corners in this room. You bring in literally 5 of them. One of them has to be cut, I assume, at least. But you're doing things. You're trying to fill in the holes. That's definitely what you can tell here. They get a bunch of linebackers. They have a bunch of corners. They're filling in the holes that were big problems during their last season. I do like their draft to a point. It's not the most star-studded, but it's got a good amount of depth. Kamari Lassiter, Kalen Bullock, Solomon Byrd, Blake Fisher, Cade Stover. I'm a fan of most of those picks. Those are all good to me. Houston, like I said, Danielle Hunter's their best thing, and that brings them up to an A-. They filled in the holes that were needed, and that's the biggest part of all of this right here. Going into our last team in this division, the Tennessee Titans, you lose Mike Vrabel, and that's a big, big loss. I know they're trying to do a whole culture shift and things, but ultimately he's just not going to be replaced by a better coach. Brian Callahan is very far off from a better coach. He's never been a coach, so how can he be? At this point, that's what it is. Yeah, he could prove it wrong. That's going to take a lot. They bring in L'Jarius Sneed. They bring in Chidobe Awuzie. They bring in some wash safeties in Jamal Adams, and Quandre Diggs ain't too bad, but whatever. Kenneth Murray, Sebastian Joseph are fine. They bring in Ridley. He's a fine player, but they far overpaid him. Boyd, I like what they're doing here. I like what they're doing because, once again, they're filling in holes. They're helping their young quarterback. That's all you can do. I'm not a biggest fan of J.C. Latham. I'm just simply not. I don't think he's amazing. But he can be fine. He'll be an offensive lineman on this team. That's what they need. He probably profiles to guard better than tackle, in my opinion, but he's fine. I don't love the Tony Pollard signing. I really wish they would have rather just run with Tyjae Spears. He's much more interesting, in my opinion. But once again, it is what it is. I like Cedric Gray. I like Tavondre Sweat. I am sorry. Did I once again repeat Cade Stover? I did. My bad. Either way, Cade Stover's not a Titan. Anyways, it's late when I'm recording this, so it's been a long day putting this all together. Please excuse the mess-ups there. At least I recognize them. But they did some good stuff. Like I said, they bring in some good players. Cushenberry's a very solid center. They're doing things on the O-line. They bring in a good backup in Mason Rudolph. Tennessee, not the most special. They're going to get a C+, just because L'Jarius Sneed is what they did, but the loss of Mike Vrabel is probably going to weigh down the rest of this quite substantially. The Denver Broncos lose Russell Wilson, lose Jerry Jeudy, lose Josie Jewell, lose Justin Simmons, lose Lloyd Cushenberry. A lot of losses there, but they bring in Bo Nix. They bring in Zach Wilson. They bring in Josh Reynolds. That's pretty solid. They bring in Levi Wallace. He's decent-ish. Brandon Jones, Cody Barton. That's a lot of decent. They brought in a lot of decent, okay? Is it amazing? No. I really like what their defensive draft was, bringing in Jonah Ellis and Chris Abrams-Drain. And although he fell down in the draft process quite a bit, Troy Franklin, this is probably the best place for him to go. Because of his fall, he's going to play with his college quarterback. That's going to give him a lot more comfort coming into the league that a lot of guys aren't going to get. Denver, did they do anything special? No. Are they retooling and taking this year as probably just a year to see what Bo Nix can do and see if he maybe can be the future? Yes. They're going to be fine. They get a B- just because they didn't really have much to work with. The biggest loss they have is losing Russell Wilson and paying him to leave. Paying him a lot to leave. The Kansas City Chiefs, they lose L'Jarius Sneed. That's a big, big, big loss. I don't really think anything else here is worth mentioning. Hollywood Brown is a low-tier number 2 receiver. They brought in backups other than that. Their draft was okay. I'm fine with Xavier Worthy. Nothing. He's just not. He's fine. He'll be fine. He won't be special. He'll be fine. Kingsley Sumatai is probably their best draft pick overall. That or Kamal Hadden. But just once again, nothing special here. Nothing to really go over. Kansas City's getting a C. That's probably a little generous, to be quite honest with you. Then going to the LA Chargers, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett, Jalen Guyton, Austin Eckler, Will Greer, Will Clapp. They fire Brandon Staley, the best thing they could have done ever. And honestly, that and bringing in Jim Harbaugh, that kind of upgrade is otherworldly. You really can't numericalize that at all right there. You just can't, because that is quite the improvement. That might be enough to break the Charger curse that's been around for years and years and years and years. You bring in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, the Ravens duo. Great. Neither of them are special. Bradley Bozeman. Okay, I'm a fan of that. He's a solid center. That's fine. You lose out on your tight end pretty substantially. Everett is far better than Disley or Hurst. Chark is fine. Bud Dupree, fine. Denzel Perry, fine. Shaq Quarterman, whatever. Fulton, fine. Poona Ford, fine. Nothing special if you can't get the gist. The draft, I like it for the most part. Joe Alt, Ladd McConkey, Kamani Vidal, Brennan Rice, all solid offensive pickups. Then defensively, in terms of draft position at least, defensively, Junior Colson, Cam Hart, I'm a fan of those two specifically. But, you know, honestly with them, the best thing they did was just get their coach fixed forever. This is the greatest thing ever. Jim Harbaugh, you are quite literally the savior of this franchise. They will win a Super Bowl under you if you are there long enough. If you can handle the Los Angeles Chargers long enough, they're getting a B+ because simply Jim Harbaugh alone. If they would have done one move that would have done anything to their roster substantial, they would be probably an A+++. Now, for our final team here in the AFC, the Raiders, they get Christian Wilkins, one of the biggest adds of the offseason, but they lose out on just a lot of depth. Jermaine Illuminor is probably the worst loss. He was a really good player for them last year, one way or another. You know, they lose Bilal Nichols and Jerry Tillery, but those are just depth pieces, nothing special there. Overall, replacing them with, Christian Wilkins is going to be a lot better than not. Josh McDaniels, they fired him obviously last year, and you bring in Antonio Pierce, and as good as he, you know, was with not a whole lot of great things, there's just not a whole lot to, you know, be shocked with him. He's not necessarily, you know, a known system of a coach. With the offseason he just had, a lot of things could look different than last year. We really have nothing to go off of Antonio Pierce on. He seems like he has the locker room. That's the best thing you can give him. I'm not excited for him. I'm not unexcited for him. He's just kind of there. But they bring in Gardner Minshew, so at least you have a okay quarterback. But was Gardner Minshew just a product of Shane Steichen being a genius offensively? Very possible there. The draft, I do like Brock Bowers and JPJ, Delmar Glaze even. I like the Tommy Eichenberg pickup when they got him. Even MJ Devonshire in the 7th was a really solid pickup per value. But overall, they get a B-, mainly because of the Christian Wilkins. That was a big factor here, a big drawing point. But that is going to be it for this AFC West. There's a lot of things in this division that did change. So let me know in the comments what you think was the biggest change, the best change, the worst change, the most ineffective change that will happen. I want to know what you think about your team or your rival team, whatever it may be. Either way, thank y'all for watching. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. They don't cost you a thing and help me out a ton. I'll see you on the next one.